Welcome to Not Entirely Unlike Tea with Christine Collins. Hey there, this is Christine Collins, and today we have a really interesting subject around self-care and why it can be considered a mandatory business asset or content creation asset versus a luxury. So one component that we may not be as familiar with is known as strategic resource allocation, which has to do with how our brain operates in managing energy. So our brain is constantly in a mode of calculating which activities deserve our full resources and which activities are low priority based on perceived importance. So when we consistently neglect some particular activity, the brain will interpret this as evidence that that particular activity is a low priority. And what this does is then actually reduces blood flow and glucose allocation to the regions responsible for things like creativity, strategic thinking, and emotional regulation, which are the exact areas that entrepreneurs and creators need the most. So when we constantly neglect self-care, we're actually reducing resource allocation to some of the regions in the brain that we actually need to be creative and productive. And in contrast, by consistently sending signals that self-care is actually important and that we are a high-value asset that's worth investing in, this changes how the prefrontal cortex will allocate resources when we're working on the business. So it's not just that it feels better, it's actually upgrading neural processing power for those tasks. You're probably already familiar with the idea of neuroplasticity, meaning that our brain can form new connections, but there are ways in which specific types of downtime can dramatically enhance that process. When we are in a state of relaxed alertness, our neuroplasticity rates may increase by up to 300%. And that relaxed alertness is kind of a sweet spot between meditation and problem solving, alpha and theta brainwaves that we can achieve through using tools like hypnosis and yoga nidra and many other things. So we could play around with this and try some techniques where instead of a more traditional type of meditation or relaxation practice, we're alternating between relaxation and alertness or awareness. Now, one of the ways I personally like to do this, and everybody kind of finds their own sweet spot for it, is I like to get into a deeply relaxed state using a hypnosis or similar type of audio. And in that period of time, I allow my brain to kind of wander and come up with ideas. Now, I'll often go in with a specific idea or question, something maybe that I'm trying to solve, perhaps a problem I'm trying to get some insight or reflection on. And so I'm alternating between this deep relaxation, allow my body and mind to fully relax, but also allowing that more active state to be a part of the process. And your brain will continue to work to try to solve that problem or come up with those ideas while you're in that relaxed space because you've kind of given it a task to focus on. Another concept that may be a little bit less familiar with is that often we think of self-care as something that we would do after a stressful event to recover. But there's actually some research that indicates that preemptive relaxation can be quite useful. So having a specific time before an anticipated stressor or before an anticipated period of work or productivity, and that can dramatically change how we process that upcoming challenge. So we're kind of activating the parasympathetic nervous system ahead of the higher pressure situation, like a stress inoculation, kind of like a buffer, and then it primes our brain to process some of those challenges or that period of productivity through the prefrontal cortex rather than through the amygdala, which is the more emotional component. And it keeps us in more of a strategic, calm mode versus a more reactive mode. So scheduling a few minutes of some type of relaxing activity, it could be breathing work, it could be meditation, whatever it is that works for you, and doing it maybe 20 minutes or so before a challenging meeting or before a period of high productivity or creation. And that allows the neurotransmitter levels to really balance and optimize for that situation. And since we looked at capacity, it's also equally important that we manage our capacity in order to keep the highest functioning available for the most important projects. So sometimes we have a tendency to want to stick things through and keep working on something even when it's maybe not successful and we've really given it a fair shot. lot, occasionally it's well worth the time to kind of evaluate projects that are more draining than they are satisfying or rewarding, and eliminating a few of the things that are actually taking away from our capacity to focus on the things that are working really well or have a better potential to work really well. And finally, something that I have been promoting for a very long time, but is actually backed by neuroscience as well, is to have some kind of a consistent practice in which you create space for new ideas to come in, where you're not always in a doing or a working mode, but you actually have some slated time for deliberate unstructure that allows for you to be in a more relaxed mode, allows for those creative new ideas to come in, and allows for some spontaneous cognitive associations to occur. We often get some of our biggest ideas and breakthroughs during time that is not specifically work time. So many of us have had the experience of brilliant genius ideas happening when you're trying to fall asleep, or even in the middle of the night, or when you're in the shower, or trying to do something relaxing. And it can feel very inconvenient, but we can actually train our brains, and we can schedule an allotted, slated time where we can allow for these ideas to come in and allow the brain to do its creative work more so on our schedule. And so we have time that is officially dedicated to unstructured thinking. We're not focused necessarily on a particular project, although that's valuable too, but this is time that's actually just open-ended, allowing for new things to enter in. And it's almost like giving yourself psychological permission to just be a little bit creative and have that downtime. And when we use all of these things together synergistically, we can have tremendously powerful impact on the success and well-being, not only of our business, but of ourselves as a whole. So I hope you found this to be valuable. If you're interested in tools that can help support you in facilitating some of this scheduled downtime, some of this neuroplasticity, some of this creative idea generation time, I offer a slate of tools in my mindset membership, like hypnosis, yoga nidra, visualization, and many others. And all of that information is in the show notes for you. And until we connect the next time, I wish you the most magical and creative rest of your day. Thanks for listening. This is Christine Collins at transformcreate.com.